Hi, Juan. How are you? That's my question.
Great. I am good. There's a lot of stuff going on. I think Monday is going to be insane. Like the schedule, the lab week schedule shows how, don't plan right in the middle of all of the things. That's where everyone plans it. But yeah, good.
Well, maybe a question on the brand side, because I think someone raised it earlier. What do you think the PL brand represents today, and what are some things that you would like it to represent that we should move in that direction?
I think the PL brand today represents different things to different communities, and so right now, the intersection would be it's a strong community of builders across many different roles and areas, kind of spanning everything from founders and developers, and engineers, and product builders, and funders. Broadly, I think strongly connected to crypto and Web3, and with a very strong technical orientation in terms of deep systems. And now increasingly a very strong public goods, broader region impact orientation. And I think that's kind of like the broad intersection that a lot of people know. There's also a very strong Filecoin connectivity because of the last few years, but thankfully that's like broadening in people's minds. I think the confusion is like decreasing. And what I would like it to mean more is what the video that I showed at the beginning over time. And so I think that's starting to happen with a lot of communities. So I would say maybe a few thousand people already think about it that way. And it would be great if like 1 million people think about it that way. So, yeah. I think there's one thing where in order to succeed as an innovation network, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we should get it to mean something like, something in the category of things like YC and Andreessen Horowitz and Silicon Valley, or maybe a university. And so like something in the space there. And so if people like map PL to that, I think it would be very helpful in order to help bring people into the network from a lot of fields that are not in the crypto and Web3 space. And so we have to think about how to build that brand. So YC had to do this by specific communications, blog posts, videos, and then running a set of startup events in universities where a bunch of the partners went to speak at those universities and generated a lot of material through that. And so that's one way to build that brand. Because I think even before that, people didn't know about YC as much in certain areas. Like it was just kind of YC was this thing out there in Silicon Valley that was mysterious. And I think those sessions and startup school was very helpful in that. So I think doing some of that orientation will help put PL's brand on the map that way. I think also a podcast would do that. And so I think those two things could be pretty valuable things for 2025. Cool. Next question.
Thank you, Juan. So it's such a great community and strong background. And the one thing I think it's missing is DeFi integration. And if you have any view on the future plan for the DeFi on FEM, it's still young. It's a year and a half, but
so you mean for Filecoin specifically? I would say there's a range of people working on that now, and I think probably Filecoin's connectivity is stronger than a lot of other L1s and L2s, but it's definitely not as strong as it should be. I think better bridges will help, better finality will help, and then there's a lot of onboarding specific partners. I think Axelar has been doing a great job bringing in a lot of connectivity. But this is one of the things that gives a huge network effect to Ethereum. Ethereum having an enormous amount of liquidity in it is one of the big network effects. And I think Ethereum is going to be building a moat around that instead of building connectivity to the rest of the world. I think there's going to be a short-sighted thing in that in order to like not lose to Solana, Ethereum, I think, will try to cement the liquidity moat and will decrease interconnectivity and will try to force all the interactions to happen in L1, L2s in Ethereum. And so I don't know how that will shake out over time, but I would expect a lot of the oncoming liquidity in the crypto space to, I think, enter outside of Ethereum, meaning I think Ethereum is still going to grow its liquidity massively, but I think more liquidity will come into Bitcoin and Bitcoin-related things and Solana. So I think what Filecoin should do is build stronger and better bridges to Ethereum, enable contracts to happen on the Ethereum L1 or L2 and settle there to improve the Filecoin economy. So bring the Filecoin economy to Ethereum and leverage the liquidity and capital there and capital markets there. Like, why not? And then the second thing we should do is build very strong connectivity and bridges to the Solana and Bitcoin and other communities to bring whatever utility happens in those networks into Filecoin. Yep. So, yep.
So right now, we're looking at the 4 focus areas, and they mean different things to different people. Do you see a point in the near midterm, where areas like Neurotech start to catch up, and then do you see points where there'll be bridges between the different folks, something like Neurotech and Web3, or the builders and the researchers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think Neurotech as a field is very small. So Neurotech is in its infancy. In terms of the scale of people involved is, a few thousand total. That are like, there's maybe a few tens of thousands that work in neuroscience across a lot of universities and medical-related companies and so on. But I wouldn't describe that as like really the emerging neurotech field. The very fast-paced neurotech field that is building out BCIs and going to like solve these grand challenge problems like emulation and so on and recording, that group is pretty small, I think. There's a few thousand people that are making enormous improvements, but it's not very big. And so that means like very quickly we can become a very large connector there. But the brand and reputation really matters because in deeply academic fields, people tend to make a lot of decisions on knee-jerk reactions of what other people think, just because reputation is a deep entrenched structure in how academic credit works and how academic funding flows. And so in traditional science fields, if you say the wrong thing, you'll be written off. And it's really stupid. Like I think it's one of the things that pushed a lot of people out of academia. But that's just how it works. And so we have to tread that line carefully. And so that means we have to build neurotech related things with that neurotech orientation and be careful and wary of bringing in other communities that behave very differently, right? So the Web3 community is very different. It is totally fine with a super open, accessible environment. And so much so that there's so low friction that people can say almost anything, even in completely false things, and be like supported and like enabled, which is fine in terms of creating an accessible environment, but difficult because it generates a lot of noise. And so that means that a lot of people in crypto and Web3 will say a lot of things that like don't make any sense in the neuroscience world. And if you mix those two things, then the neuroscientists will like become very allergic to that. That's what's happening in DeSci, right? So DeSci today, you can see it as a microcosm of this kind of behavior, where the crypto community is trying to improve a bunch of the science-oriented flows, but a lot of the things that people in the crypto community say make scientists like super allergic to the entire space. And so there's just like this hard clash where DeSci is having a very difficult time like supporting getting adoption in academic environments simply because it's saying a few things that a lot of traditional academics just disagree with, or don't understand in a lot of cases. And so we have to tread that carefully. So I would like think about what is the right structure and messaging and brand based on like a few neurotech oriented leaders, and then back calculate from that, and then figure out where do we build bridges. A concrete example, I just did I was at like a Neurotech specific event, Neurotech and crypto event recently, and it was just super noisy. Like the things being said was just nonsensical. And so relative to, I think the lab week that we ran was very good in terms of getting to really high quality conversations. Like a set of the right people were in the room.
Yeah, so you see that segmentation pretty clear, at least for the near term, right? That the twain don't mix, and the challenge is, do you see a challenge with the Protocol Labs brand being so into Web3 that it clouds the...
I would approach it like a university. I think a university does this very well. They create a notion of different departments, and they bring very strong leaders in those departments, and they establish strength of opinion in those fields, and they clearly label the difference, right? So like there's the university, and then there's a specific department, and a specific field, and a specific group, and a specific professor. And so if a random professor or a random student says something that a person in another department totally doesn't get or completely disagrees with and thinks is bullshit, that'll be fine because the university environment enables that and gives people a way of like bucketing. It's like, well, like you get these like interfield rivalries that emerge where, field A thinks like field B is full of shit. And like, that's fine. Like it's not ideal, create silos and whatnot, but it's a fine environment to enable each of these things to proceed. And usually it's the people that end up translating between the two that end up finding a lot of untrodden paths and end up finding it very profitable to like search for new ideas there. But yeah, I would think of like universities like has a right vibe in terms of welcoming of a lot of different structures and perspectives in their own context.
One thing. So I'd like to ask a more general point of view of the Web3 mass adoption. And when I look at the transition from Web 1 to Web 2, it seemed to went a bit smooth. And Web 2 to Web 3 is a bit kind of slow. And then a lot of people struggling get the definition of Web 3, and a lot of people do define by their own. And also Web 3 guys are try to do something, but it feels like left behind and not something doing well.
Yeah.
Well, what would be the factor to make this mass adoption, and then what PL can do?
Yeah, so I'll make a set of concrete observations first, and then I'll try to give you my opinion. So some concrete observations. Web 1 was roughly, it was a lot of the underlying technologies were built in the mid to late 80s, and it was really, sparked with the beginning of Tim Berners-Lee's browser structure, and it went from 1991 to maybe 2003, roughly. Web 2 started being discussed and in the context of Web 1 in like the mid 90s, and a lot of the technologies got built in the mid 90s, like 95 through 2002 and 3. And it was really when like the social networks started appearing, like LiveJournal and MySpace and Facebook. And so this is like 99 through 2003 that like it started the beginning. And then really by 2004, 2005, it was in full swing. So it took about like 10 years-ish to build a lot of the technologies. And then Web 2, the span is like maybe 2005 through 2025, like now, right? At least. Actually, maybe 2020, and then like now we're entering a weird other period where there's fragmentation. And it was really kind of like maybe Instagram and WhatsApp and Snapchat that were like examples of that in full swing, or Uber in full swing. And so I would say like it took like 10 to 15 years for it to build. But you're right that like the adoption was a lot smoother because I think the technologies were a lot more integrated and a lot of companies got built in that landscape. The other piece is that Web 1 was very small. It was like a few million people. It was not, a billion people. And so going from like a few million people to suddenly you have the technologies that are onboarding massive amounts of people behaving this way with the expansion of mobile phones and so on. Mobile phones were Web 2 from the beginning. That meant like Web 2 eclipsed Web 1 very quickly. And in fact, you got a lot of Web 1 people harping on Web 2 at the time, being like, oh, all of these centralized things are taking away our blogs, and like, nobody makes their own websites anymore. Nobody puts up their own page with GIFs. Like, this is dumb. And that conversation was like, but the utility was just so much smoother. Now in Web 3, it has definitely taken a lot longer. So it's been about 10 years of developing a lot of the crypto tech and Web 3 tech. The adoption is happening and the transition is happening, but it's definitely slower than we expected to. But I don't think it's that much slower. I think it might be slower by a factor of 2, not by a factor of 10. And so it's just that years for us feel so long. And so going from like an adoption transition in 5 years versus an adoption transition in 10, it's a very big difference. Or like in 10 to 20 is like a very big difference. And so I think like that's like the actual practical bottom line. Second, there's a lot of things about the crypto space and Web3 that get misinterpreted or misdescribed, and there's a lot of misinformation about it, right? So my favorite example of this stuff is NFTs. Like NFTs because of the NFT art bubble, they got kind of like very quickly in the mainstream perspective parlance. Like, there was the Saturday Night Live video about, what the hell is an NFT? And it was like, that had like tens of millions or hundreds of millions of views and said the opinion on what these things were. And so then you had like this huge crash coupled with like the 2021, 2023 like downturn, and that just kind of colored everyone's opinion about crypto and NFTs and whatnot in the mainstream, and it gave a lot of opinions that are just deeply misinformed, right? Like there were a lot of people being like, oh, blockchains are destroying the environment, and it's like, well, that's just totally misinformed. Like proof of stake is not doing that at all. And so we have to fight that misinformation structure with very concrete, practical use cases and good materials that diffuse this. I think part of the issue is crypto got very politicized because it has so much to do with money and financial instruments and whatnot. Yeah. It got very politicized very quickly. And hopefully I think that might change over the next few years. I don't know. But I think in a lot of places, it's just become, there's a lot of parties that have a lot to lose because of crypto. A lot of entrenched parties that do not want to be disintermediated and who are fueling a lot of bad information about what crypto is. And there's also like this problem around, because crypto has to deal with money, there's just an old fight going back to the 1850s at least or beyond, where like the world has kind of been divided into people where there's a tenet or an assumption that money is the root of all evil, or money is a tool that you use to organize civilization, and it can be used in either way, for good or bad. And that division, which is very old and runs very deep, colors so many other opinions. Like it led to the biggest fight in the 20th century. And that division is also showing up in crypto. And so you see a lot of communities that are tangentially related to Web3 or the decentralized web or crypto, and they align roughly with one or the other of those opinions. And that is another issue because it becomes kind of politicized. There's political groups that align with one of those opinions. There's more opinions than those two. Like the other opinion is like the more extreme thing, which I think a lot of the crypto casino culture embodies, is, hey, you should just like make money and get rich, and like that's the only thing that matters. And like that's the extreme counterpoint to like money is the root of all evil. Yeah. And like those two political groups are like duking it out at scale. And the in-between pragmatic opinion in the middle of like, hey, money's just a tool and we happen to be embedded in a world that uses it, so you might as well use it. That opinion gets like thrown out the window. And so I think the way to get through that is by de-emphasizing all the casino use cases, de-emphasizing like meme coins, de-emphasizing all of this stuff. Like this is a controversial opinion. I think a lot of people disagree with me on this in crypto. A lot of people are like fueling the casino and fueling meme coins and whatnot. I think that is inhibiting adoption in a huge way because there's millions of people who like get disgusted by that kind of stuff, and they want much more legit use cases. So I would plug things like Funding the Commons that is happening, today and tomorrow. It's turning yesterday, and as a totally different landscape of conversation. And I would encourage building applications that don't necessarily expose that or say crypto or whatever to the end user and just solve problems, right? Like at the end of the day, if you solve people's problems, they don't care what technology it uses. Just solve the damn problem well. And so do that, and don't worry about, I think we have a serious usability problem where you try to use anything with crypto and then suddenly you land in this madness of wallets and networks, and are you on this L2 sending to this other L2 or this other L1? It's just super stupid. And that, it'll probably take like 3 years to clean that up. But I think usability is like number one. If you have really good usability and you actually deliver value to people in scalable ways, people use it massively. And by the way, the lack of adoption has been overstated. There's a good report recently from, I think, Andreessen that shows the adoption rate of crypto is actually faster than the internet. And sorry, than the original like Web 1, Web 2 onboarding path.
Oh, that's great.
It's just not as fast as like ChatGPT. So, yeah.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
Those numbers could just be speculators, correct? So like
No, that number removed a lot of the speculators and looked at just parties that are active users of wallets.
Okay.
Like not just wallets in an exchange speculating, but rather wallets being used to transact on chain.
Okay. I think from my opinion, just watching this play out over the years, as Juan did mention, there just seems to be a lack of clear use case when it comes to using crypto, right? I thought we would see more of them by now, but
well, here's a very concrete use case. If you live in a country with high inflation, you need to get out of your local currency and get into a different currency.
but that's always been the use case. I mean, also
Yeah,
buying
but
drugs
like
on the
what
dark
I'm trying
web.
to say is like that's a legitimate use case that is not speculation.
Yeah. Yep. So is Monero on the dark web as well?
Yeah, I would say also things like the lending pools, so Aave and just DeFi lending pools. I know many people who've bought like their houses and created an equivalent of a mortgage on chain, and it's amazing. Like in countries where they don't have mortgages, and that's super cool.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. And when I see this kind of like to me, it's a bit slower than I expected the adoption. And one thing that helped the adoption of Web 2 is the economic incentives. And when Google and Facebook find a way to make the monetized system around the attention economy, but it went too much, and then Web3, okay, let's correct that, and then find a way to create economic incentives to more fair way.
Yeah.
But when I see the
But then you get pumped out fun with meme coins. And it's like,
Yeah, and
it's
then-
like this should not be the dominant adoption path.
VC is burning the field, and then they just use this power to make money, and then kind of see it's kind of sadly.
Here's a Web3 technology that is not described as that doesn't have crypto in it, cryptocurrencies in it. Blue Sky,
Blue Sky.
a project from in the PL network.
Yeah.
It is built with IPFS primitives.
Yeah.
And it started in and around our community, and it is entirely a Web3 social network, and it has tens of millions of users now. It's 10, 13, 14 million users now. And it's growing pretty quickly, but people don't talk about that like Web3 adoption because no, that's just like the normal world, and so I don't know. I think that's pretty large adoption. We're getting there. I think consumer use cases really matter. So consumer use cases with very good UI. I think one of the problems infrastructure-wise is that connecting mobile apps. There's no easy way to have a backend in crypto in a decentralized setting.
Yeah.
And so even something very basic, you end up having to revert back to centralized things. And that sucks. And so if we solve that problem, be able to run any random web server in a crypto context verifiably with ZK, like that would open the door massively. So like do like a Vercel style thing, but with ZK underneath the hood. That would like open up the aperture totally. But Cool. Other questions? And I think we need to wrap up quickly. So I'll take like 2 more questions.
One, how do you expect the macro environment to change the next year, given the elections and all that stuff?
Well, the market over the last few days has been predicting lowering of interest rates, potentially higher inflation, a lot of pro-business and pro-capital rules, and unclear maybe like what's going to happen with the ongoing wars. But I think the market is basically right now trading a lot on the expectation that next year is going to be a lot more of an upturn bull market type thing. It's unclear if it'll materialize, right? Like a lot, like the world can change very quickly. And even though things might be trending in that direction, that's, who knows? Like Bitcoin has broken through all-time highs multiple times in the last week, right? Like it went to, it's like 77 today or something like that, like almost 80. Like, and so that clearly says that a lot of people see the shift macro-wise next year to be strong for business globally, like potentially higher inflation, move into high-risk assets, and a lot of the regulation around crypto weakening, or not weakening, but like remove a lot of the bad regulation. And so that just like, for crypto specifically, it's very strong. And then for just capital assets in general, I think it's fairly strong. I think I think there's a lot, big question marks around the wars. I think like the wars are gonna totally change the landscape. And so it's not really clear what's going to happen in Q1, Q2 around that. And so I would expect that to really change how the macro landscape operates, because it doesn't even have to be a big blow up, but some kind of things can lead to supply chain mess ups that then totally warp some part of the economy and then cascade into other problems. And so things seem to be very well set up, but I don't know. That would be my guess. So my guess is like, no matter what, opinions are or whatever, a silver lining is that for crypto, it probably means that innovation will get a lot faster and larger scale in 2025. And I think, that would be my guess. I'll ask one question that I think will be relevant for you guys. Like, what are the highest leverage things that people could be doing right now in 2024, early 2025, to set yourself up between 25 and 26 and 27, given that the world is changing a lot and given that AI is looming? So first I would say AI is massively transformative. Like everybody already uses LLMs today. I'm sure like all of you are like using them for all kinds of things. And if you don't know you're using them, tons of applications and whatnot that you talk to are LLMs behind the scenes. And I'm starting to get like LLM output in my Telegram conversations with other people. Like today, this morning, I was talking to like somebody who's like helping me with something, and I got back they just like copy pasted what the LLM told them to tell me. It was really funny because it was like the message said, you could say : and then the response. It was really funny. But like that's what's starting to happen. And so what I would say is, my expectation is that we have not hit the scaling limits. The next generation of models are going to be a similar level of step change improvement from GPT-3 to GPT-4. I think the world will be more ready for it, so it'll come as not as important, because the 3 to 4 jump was so surprising that everyone freaked out. The 4 to 5 change is now expected, so people will dismiss it, but I think the capability will actually be the same kind of dramatic jump. I think we're maybe 2 jumps away from agents that are able to do large swaths of what humans can do today. And the inference structure is very cheap. Like it's very expensive to train a model, but once you have a model, you have 1 terabyte that you run in with a single GPU in your laptop. and then suddenly you get like the equivalent of close to a human brain, not quite yet, but like close to. And so the entire economic landscape changes once you have that. It's going to take a while for those things to get adopted and to get made useful. If that translates into recursive self-improvement in ASI, that's a whole opening of can of worms where the entire world changes very quickly. And that's what leads to things like AI risk and other problems. But even in the good case where like none of that bad stuff comes to pass, the economic impacts over the next 10 to 20 years are gargantuan. Like everything, or not everything, but like a lot of the ways in which we have thought about economies functioning in the past will change over 10 to 20 years. I think that Tyler Cohen thinks that the change will be slow enough that it'll be dramatic improvement, but it'll be slow enough that we'll adapt to it and we'll be able to like cope with it and it'll be fine. I suspect that he's wrong about that, and I suspect that that as soon as you have entire sectors of the economy that can just be ML models talking to each other or ML models running robots, like major changes to the world start appearing. And so that would be somewhere between 2027 and 2035. And so what I would do to set up for that is I would think of it as like there's huge economic waves coming, and just get really good at surfing the economic waves. So that means, and AI automation waves. So play with all the tools, stay abreast of all the tools, leverage them in everything that you do, and then reconfigure your workflows so that you can leverage these models, and reconfigure your workflows so that you learn from these models. Try to like get these models to help you learn way faster. You can now, like what you have available today is so different from what you had 10 years ago or what people had 50 or 100 years ago. You have like this insanely high leverage way of learning anything you want to learn about anything at all. Like these models have a compressed distillation of everything that humanity has written about, and it's just so incredibly powerful. And so you can now like level yourself. You can use that as like your teacher. Now it's very spotty, right? Like it hallucinates a lot. So you have to like learn how to triangulate and relate like what's right. And so you just use it as a very faulty guide for now, but you can expect that it's just going to get higher and higher quality. And so improve your workflow so you can automate more for yourself. And I would aim towards like getting, so one of the most important lessons I think that I learned early is that the way the capitalism economy works is that owning pieces of high growth assets is what the economy is tuned for, and is not tuned for cash flows. So the prior economies, 300 years ago to now, were oriented around building incomes, meaning you do something and you generate some inflow and income and cash flow. And it's just about adding more things to your stack of like how you can generate income, whether that's through a job or like by building by getting land and getting yield from the land or whatever. And in the 20th century, that shifted to there's an enormously high growth set of activities. Few of them, most of them kind of get eaten out, but a few of them are really high growth. And what really matters is getting a proportion of the high growth things. So that means like, this is why tech stocks have been so incredibly good over the last 30, 40 years. And so think of like what will be productive assets in the world and how do you get access to those as much as you can. And so tune the things that you do into shares of assets. Then you have to diversify because you need to you don't want to place too much risk on various different segments or whatever. But I would say turn your energy and your time into ways of increasing asset base, and leverage AI to learn as much as you can and learn how to automate workflows, and just stay abreast of, disbelieve a lot of the mainstream opinion and stay abreast of the changes by doing trying the stuff out yourself and playing with it, and just update what you think is likely to happen based on what you are doing with the tools yourself, and just discount that a lot of the ways that people were doing things in the past aren't really going to apply anymore. It's going to be related, but things are going to be very different. Random things will get super easy. Nobody expected that we would get pixel perfect, beautiful imagery or video this fast. That was not in the cards. People expected other stuff to fall first, but that was crazy. The fact that legal advice now is LLMs can give you very good legal information. By the way, that not a lawyer. That is not legal advice. Consult your actual lawyer. or a robo lawyer with a license that's part of the bar. But yeah, when will a GPT pass the bar and like then get allowed to like practice law? Like I don't know, probably pretty soon, right? Like they're passing law school exams. So yeah, like people weren't expecting that to happen that quickly. And so you should expect that a lot of professions are going to centralize, meaning so usually there's like a large curve of skill, and the highest in skill you go, sometimes you can get a lot of leverage. And what's going to happen with these AI tools is initially you'll get like this steepening of the curve where people are going to be able to do so much more that everyone's productivity is going to increase. So because everyone's productivity increases, the demand for that good and service will grow, but probably not grow as fast as everyone's skill and productivity is growing, which will mean that a lot of firms are going to downsize. So like very massive law firms will stop hiring as much or downsize and produce 10x the output. And so you should expect this kind of thing to happen in a lot of fields. And so what you should do is like stay way ahead of that by like leveraging the tools, automate, get access to capital. And yeah, there's gonna be a lot of flexibility. So yeah, I don't know if that's used. So that's what I would do. Yeah, that was my own question, but hopefully that's useful. Good luck.